Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I want to talk to you about the app theming and themes inside of dBASE Plus 11. And, as I said, back in dBASE Plus 8, we introduced the themes back then. But we did not allow you to actually have those themes go out to your customer. So dBASE had a new look and feel, but the applications that you were building had a limited look and feel. Now, we did some things throughout the releases to enhance that, such as updating the graphics support so you could do ping graphics, and alpha support, and things like that, so you could have and create better looking applications. And in dBASE Plus 10, we actually released over 4,000 new graphic elements that you could use inside of your product through resource DLLs. And in dBASE 11, one of the things that we really wanted to do is make sure that we can give that theming out to the rest of the out to the products that are being generated. So let's see how you would do that. Now, it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to come in and create a new file, or a new form, excuse me, and I'm going to go into the designer, and that's going to kick off my designer structure. Now, when I come in, I always try to show people how to use dBASE and get the most out of dBASE. A lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of functionality that they may or may not know about. One of them is that you can set up dBASE to work the way you want it to work. And it's really, really flexible now, so that if you have multiple, if you have a multiple monitor setup, you can still set up things like you used to, right? So if I want to take component palette, I can take the component palette and I can float it. If I want to take my inspector, I can also float that as well, and I can move these things around. Now, we also have this nice little structure up here, this tab manager, and I can play with each one of the tab managers to see where my code is at, where my form's at, and things like that. Now, I don't have a dual monitor setup, so I like to keep my things a little bit differently organized. So for me, I usually grab the inspector, and notice when I start moving it, I'm holding down my left arrow button right now on my mouse, and I'm going to move that over to that little box area right there. And you'll notice that blue looking shade is going to tell me that's where my inspector is going to go. Now, when I do that, I'm keeping that inspector locked into there, and I can move the size, I can play with the sizing and things like that, but for me, I want my inspector locked because I use the inspector a lot. Now, when it comes to components, having it floating is fine, but for me, I actually like to go ahead and put it on the other side, thin it down a little bit, and then I also like to click the little thumbtack up here. Now, this thumbtack, as you can, when I click it, will automatically make the component palette disappear. Now, if I want to get my component palette back, all I do is put my mouse over top of it, and then I can go in and pick whichever component I want to put onto my form. So I'm going to go ahead and click on a push button, and I'm going to come in here and make it a fairly good-sized push button. Okay. Now, once I'm in here, notice the component palette slipped away. I don't have to deal with it. I have as much screen space as I need for that. So now that I have this push button, I don't really want to call it push button. I think I want to call it change theme. So we're going to come into here, and I'm going to come down to the text, and I'm going to type in change theme. Now, when I did that, that's fine. That looks okay. But I may want to use a CAU conformance, which means I can hit the Alt and the letter, and it will automatically press the button and those types of things as well. So to do that, all I want to do is come into my change theme, my text, and I want to. I know this is basic, but I just want to add an ampersand to it, and an and sign, excuse me, and it'll add the underline for the C up there. So that's pretty straightforward, pretty normal kind of stuff. Now, I'm going to go ahead and save this structure, and we're going to call this class 2 example 1, and I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then I want to now go into the source code because I want to add a graphic to it. Now, for this, to add a graphic, it's a lot of times you either have to go to a resource DLL or you have to go to a file location. And to do that, it's a really long line, and I don't want to have to type that in. So one of the things that dBASE brings to the table is something called abbreviations. So if I come down to my Edit menu item and I slide down here, you'll see that I have Expand Abbreviation and Insert Abbreviation. And we're going to use that when we go into the source code because I want to add a graphic to my structure. Now, what those abbreviations are basically code snippets. So you may be wondering, where are those located on my box? Well, ironically, if you go out to your documents, dBASE +11, you'll see that there's a properties file inside of there, properties directory, excuse me, and inside of there you'll have something called abbrev.properties. Okay? Now, abbrev.properties is where all of the code snippets for dBASE has been put in. And Kathy has done a fabulous job of adding a ton of snippets. And let me just show you here. So if I come out here and I go into Notepad++, this here are all the different snippets that Kathy has added to the abbrev file. And we've added some more down here. Paul will talk about some of the web examples down here, things like that. But for me today, I'm going to be talking about theme example and theme set at this particular moment in time. So notice that I have this theme example and theme set. I want to, and notice that the theme example 1 is putting in the up button. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize this down. I'm going to hit the F12 key, which will take me into my source code. And then I'm going to slide down to my push button, and I'm going to hit enter. And now this time what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and use the insert or insert abbreviation. Now what that will do is that will pop up a little pop-up window, notice over here, and this has all of the various snippets of code that we have in here. And I wanted that theme example 1. And when I say insert right now, you'll notice that, boom, it added in that up bitmap for me. And I can move it over, and it has the complete file name and structure and everything that I need. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and hit the save button, and I'm going to close. Now, it's going to go through a little quick change here, and notice now that I have my graphic on my button. Now, one little note, I want to go back into Notepad++ for a quick second. One little note on the abbrev properties. A couple of little notes. Number one, notice that I'm putting in something from a directory right here. One of the things that should be highlighted to you is anytime you use a special character, backspace or a backslash or a special character, you have to put in 2 of them so it'll keep, because when the abbreviations inserts that into your code, they drop that because that's usually a way of separation. So you have to put 2 of them in there to keep it. So we have 2 of them in there. Another thing that Kathy pointed out to me from the last class was that when you set up your when you set up an abbreviation, when you set up a snippet of code, you name the snippet, right? So mine is called theme example, and then you put an equal sign and then the code right after that you want. Now, make sure that you don't put any spaces in between that code, because if you put spaces in between there, it won't automatically execute. So we now have our little process, everything set up. We're going to be using theme set here in a second. I'll show you how that's going to work real quickly here in a few seconds. So now we have, like I said before, we have our button. Everything's good. Everything looks good. Now again, all of the things. Remember, we have true type fonts set up inside of here. So if you wanted to, you can come out and select a different font for this. So here in a second, we will pop this up. Usually because I have so much stuff running, it takes forever for things to pop. Here any second now, there we go. And now I'm going to do Sagoo UI, which is one of the features that we use inside of the product. And I'm going to go ahead to 14. And there we go. We have now changed theme with all of the things as we expected. Now, we handle all true type fonts and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to talk about fonts in a few minutes. But we've also done some things around the border style, something we added last release, which was dBASE +10. We added the border style into containers. We also did some work on system themes. So if you turn that off, notice it kind of looks like the old process. And also my theme background. You can make it so that the theme background, you can change the theme background as well. So you have the ability now to go in there and modify, update, change those things. And like I said, we added this border. A lot of people don't realize that we did this. So I could say, well, what does raise look like? Well, you know, put a little extra line on there. I could say, what does modal look like? And now it has a square box on the inside with a little etching set on side of it. But for me, I want to go old school, so I'm going to go ahead with the drop shadow. And of course, this makes it look like 1989, but it does have the graphic, and this all comes from Microsoft. This is all part of the Microsoft button class that's available, and we exposed that, and I just want to bring that to your attention that you can change some of the look and feel a little bit by doing that. Now, this time we're going to change the actual look and feel of the form. So to do that, I'm going to click on my button, I'm going to come into events, and I'm going to click the on-click event. When I do that, it brings me into the source code as you would expect, and I'm going to say theme, I think theme set, I believe is what I called it, and then I'm going to hit the Control B. Notice that when I hit the Control B, because it could find what it was looking for, it automatically imported that line of code for me automatically. I didn't have to do anything. All I did was, know the name of my snippet, type that into the editor, hit Control B, and boom, it's done. So again, if I come into here, I'll erase this out, type in theme set, Control B. It automatically replaces that code, puts the snippet of code in there, and if you have formatting and all that kind of stuff, it'll also do that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set the _app.theme type object to a number, and I'm going to set this to 7. Now, for those people who bought dBASE plus 8 and dBASE plus 9 and dBASE plus 10 and dBASE plus 11, the theme, the color, changes every year when we release the product. The first year we did theme 7, so I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then I'm going to go ahead and close it, and we'll go ahead and run this form. There it is. Notice how when my mouse is over top of it, it's doing all the things that you'd expect. I click on it, and now boom, the entire environment is now set up for the dark look and feel. So if you looked at dBASE plus 8 with ADO, it had this look and feel to it, and it allowed you to interact and work with it, things like that. But now, with just that one line of code in your application, you can add that look and feel to your application as well. So it makes it rather easy. Now, I want to figure, how did we get this theme set up in here? Well, what we can do is we can come in here and at any time into our command window and type in inspect, open parentheses, and I want to do an _app, close parentheses. And when I do that, that's going to go ahead and bring up my navigator over to the side, over to the left-hand side. I'm going to go ahead and click on the properties, and as you can see, a lot of properties in here, a lot of things that we're doing inside of here, but I'm going to come down to the theme, and notice that the theme basically shows an object. When you click on it, then it pops up a little thing with an eye on it. You can drill into that object then and see its properties. And one of the things that you'll notice is that it says theme type, which again, if we remember our code, we were basically coming in and typing in the app, the theme type equals 7, right? So now I want to change this. Let's go ahead and change this to the system, and we'll go to something simple like that. And then I'll click on my form again, and let's go back into design. And this time, you could also have the ability to do that design inside of your environment as well. So right now it's set the system, but let's say I want to make it look like Windows 7. So it now has updated to look like Windows 7. So it's pretty easy to go ahead and change that theming. There's multiple places that you can get to that, but there's also one more. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of dBASE for a quick second. And you'll notice that it says, hey, plus INI was updated. Okay, so let's go in and take a look at plus INI. Well, depending on how it's set up, you'll notice that there we have theme number 9 is set. Well, I want to set that back to the default, which is that brushed metal that we went out with this time, which was aqua theme, and that is actually a 6. So now I can go ahead and save this, and now when I double click on dBASE plus 11, you'll notice that it comes up with the brushed metal look and feel on it. So that kind of gives you an idea of what you can do with that. Now again, I was out there in the plus INI. A lot of people ask, Mike, where's that located? Well, the plus INI is actually located at the user's username, app data local, dBASE plus 11 bin. Now, for those people who've been around, plus any hasn't moved for, I think, 8 or 9 releases now. Plus any is staying where it's at. We haven't moved it, so it's always there. But just keep in mind that it is in a kind of hidden directory because we don't want just everybody going out there unless you know what you're doing or you're directed by dBASE to do it. So it is in one of those places it's a little bit harder to find from that standpoint. Just as the abbreviations, when we come in here and look at the abbreviations that we were looking at before, the abbreviations are in the properties directory, which we've had in here before, which is, again, users, username, documents, dBASE plus 11 properties, boom, there it is. And you'll see there's a lot of properties out there for a lot of different things. And so there's a lot of functionality that's still available to us to go out with dBASE and be able to look at that. Now, again, any text editor in the abbrev.properties, you can come into it and add your own snippets. And the only thing I recommend, even though it does sort of work, I recommend shutting down dBASE. If you make a change to the abbrev, shut down dBASE, restart it, and then it's there. You can create a abbrev, save it, and then have it find it, but sometimes it gets a little confused. So I always recommend, if you're going to be making changes to the property files, go ahead and exit out, come back in, and life will be much better for you. Now, for the next example, what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be changing just one little line of code here. I'm going to go in here and just change this, so give me 2 seconds while I go into the dBASE user properties. Now again, this is in the same properties location as what the abbrev was set up to. And I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to replace a line of code and I'm going to save it. And one of the things about dBASE plus 11 is that we added brand new fonts to dBASE plus 11. And, my recommendation to Kathy and to Marty and to the guys, Paul and things like that was, hey, you know what? I think we need to make a big splash for these people. I think we need to get out there and, make them really recognize the hard work that we've done in this editor, and they appreciate it. And as you can see, I thought that it would be really good of us to ship the product with French MT script. And as you can see, it really makes the code easy to read. I think you guys will all agree that that's really easy to read. You can get a lot out of it. Well, that is kind of a joke, but the thing is that we did add a bunch of fonts to the product, okay? And, the number of fonts we had was basically 8 fonts. And they're all fixed width fonts, okay? So when we talk about fixed width fonts, that basically means that the height may be a little different, but the width is always going to be the same. And this little line right here, this little line which represents 80 columns inside of here, is very hard to figure out. You can see that I'm over halfway, and there's no way this is 40 characters long. So we actually ship brand new fonts with dBASE. And the fonts that we actually ship with is one, and we actually made the default font now, is something called Fira Mono. And when you click on it, as you can see, 23 is going to be really large. So let's go down into maybe 12. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the apply button on there. And you'll notice that everything is now changed. But the big thing about this is that the actual font size, its width, is always the same. So if I say OK to this and I open up my editor a little bit longer, this line is actually now where the 80th column is. So you can actually, that line becomes actually relevant in this process than a regular TrueType. Now, before we added the fonts, I was pushing the team to go towards something called Sugu UI. And I love Sugu UI. It's a TrueType font, but each of the actual characters may be a little bit wider, maybe a little bit taller. And so while it is easy to read, in my opinion, it's not as easy to read as the fixed width fonts that we're shipping with the product now. And we have quite a few of them in there. So if I wanted to, I could come up in here and I could look at, let's look at one or two of these guys. And I can come up here and look at Anonymous Pro. Now notice how that changed the little graphic there. It changed the structure of how the code looks. So if I come in here and say apply, notice how that changed the look and feel of that. We also have one called Hack inside of here. So if I go into here, click on Hack and hit apply, you notice that it's a little different again from that one. I also have one called Source Code Pro. So if I come into here, I come into Source Code Pro and click on it and hit apply, and it has a taller but thinner fixed width on that. And again, every time I'm doing this, this line is getting adjusted to the size font that I have in there. So that's one of the things that I think is a great thing. Everybody who is actually played with the fonts, we had a few people say that the fonts wasn't exciting, but once we got the fonts and they got to play with them and they used them for a day or two, it's like, oh my God, what a difference playing, working with these fonts. It's much easier to read, much easier to use. So for me, I do like FireMana. There are times when I do pick some of the other ones. The cool part about this is, at least in my opinion, is a couple of things. Number one, these are open source fonts. So we ship these fonts in the product. So you can actually, if you wanted to use one of these fonts and use it in your application and then deploy that out to one of your customers, you could do that without any problems, concerns, or issues. Because they're an open source font, all you have to do is include the license, which we include under our license directory, and you can go ahead and deploy these fonts out with your application if that's something that you would want. But the other thing is once these fonts are installed on your machine, you can actually go into, I'm using Notepad++, which, by the way, just as a history or a trivia thing, dBASE's new editor is the same editor that Notepad++ uses. So everything that you see in Notepad++ can sort of be done in dBASE if we've exposed it or we brought that functionality forward. But this is using right here FireMana as the font for all of my code inside of the structure. So again, there's a more advantage to having the fonts in there than what you would think from that standpoint. Now, the one last thing that I do, for me, I also and I like to give this highlight to people. Just for me, I don't really like a white background. I think it's hard to read, at least for me. So I actually come into my colors. A lot of times you'll see if I put out demos and stuff like that, you'll see that I have a dark blue background. And so to do that, I come up here to the BC++ IDE Classic, and one of the little tricks to this is that I picked it, but you have to hit the reset button. When this inside turns the way it did, then you can hit the apply button and you'll see it inside of here. Now, another great thing about some of the things of this is that I may want to change that highlighting. I might not want this to be cyan color for the string manipulation. So if I come in here to the string, you'll notice that it shows cyan for my foreground color. Now, your left mouse button is foreground, your right mouse button is background. That's how you set this. So I may want to go out there to have that be green. And when I do that, I hit the apply button, and now notice all of my strings are now set up to be that light color green. I could also come over here to do red and hit apply, and then they're the red as well. Now for me, the cyan is fine, but you could also come in here if you wanted to, and we're messing with strings. We could say that, you know what, I want all strings to have a background of white and a foreground of black. So I hit my right arrow key for the background, left button for my foreground, and I hit, and now you can see that it's set up for that as well. So a couple of things in there. So background, foreground, apply, and now we're back to the way it was before. But just one of those things that, a lot of people don't realize it's there. Another thing you can do is from the string is go ahead and turn on the bold and hit that. So notice how my strings are all bolded now. If you wanted that, you could do underline, you could do italics, anything to get your to catch your eye on that is an advantage. So normally, this is how I use dBASE day in and day out, is with that dark color, because it helps me see and read and all that kind of stuff. And with smaller graphics and higher resolution and getting older, you need all the help you can get. So the last example I'm going to give you, or I'm going to talk about, is the data buttons. One of the things that you can do inside of dBASE is that, it's known for hooking up with databases and using databases and things like that. Well, one of the things that you can do is if I come in here and I say File New, and I go into Form and I go into Designer and bring this over, I'm going to make this a little wider. We're going to drop a grid component on there, and we'll just make the grid component something like that. And then I need to drop some data on here, so I'm going to go back to my navigator. I'm going to go to Tables, and I'm just going to use Customer, and I'm going to drop Customer on my form and click back on my form. And now I can click on the grid and go to the data link and click on Customers, and I have customers. Woohoo! Now, one of the things that when I first started with dBASE, I was lacking. Where are the data aware controls? And Kathy goes, well, Mike, there's this thing called data buttons. And I was like, oh, okay. And she goes, you go do this, this, and this, and you get data buttons. So I was like, okay. So we've been shipping data buttons now for probably 20 years. Just as a side note, we are still shipping the original data buttons. So if your code is reliant on data buttons, we're still doing that, right? We're still doing the data buttons structure for you, okay? So, but I do want to add the data buttons, and I want to use the new data buttons. I don't want to use the old data buttons. So I'm going to come out here to my component palette. I'm going to right mouse click inside of my component palette, and I'm going to say Set Up Custom Components. Now, this is going to be in the same kind of location of where the property files are, right? So it's going to be in that users, username, dBASE, the whole documents, dBASE, the whole 9 yards. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to click Add. I'm going to go up, and then notice that there's a plus 11 down here. This dBASE 11 is mine. That's where I put my projects. dBASE, the plus 11 is for dBASE, and you notice I have DBL class right there. DBL classes, excuse me. And I have all my data buttons here. Now you notice we have a 64-bit data button, we have a 48 button, we have a 24, and then we have the data buttons originally. Those data buttons, again, if you're using data buttons and it's working beautifully for you and everything's happy, great. Don't have to do anything. If you're not using data buttons, well, then let's go to 64. Let's add the CC. Let's go ahead and open that. Let's go ahead and say OK, and you'll notice that the component palette basically updated. And now if we come out here, we have something called data buttons. And what I want to do with this data button behavior is I want to go ahead and drop in just a navigator. So it automatically comes in. Now these graphics are available to you in the resources directory so that you can get a hold of those and use those as you want. They're all available. They're copyrighted by dBASE, but we allow you to ship those graphics for that. If you like the graphics, if you like the look and feel, you can use those graphics in your application without having it hooked to the data, the data buttons. They can be standalone. So now I'm going to go ahead and save this, and this is going to be class 2, example 2, and now I'm going to go ahead and run it, and without changing any code, doing anything whatsoever, I'm going to go ahead and hit the next button, the prior button, the back button, the forward button. So all of that is available to me without any, it automatically goes and gets the data linkage. It automatically understands what it's doing, and you can go ahead and work with that pretty quickly and easily. Now, again, I'm going to go ahead and close this down. I'm going to make another form real quick, and one of the things that I want to do is I want to use a different data buttons one. I used the 64-bit button one there. So let's go ahead and exit out of dBASE for a quick second. And it's going to update my user properties. That's fine. And it's also going to update my plus any, which is fine. So, I was using that for some of my examples before, but the plus any, we already talked about the look and feel and the theme. But now if I come down to the bottom, you'll notice underneath the custom directive, I have the data buttons structure right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go back into dBASE. So I'm going to go back into dBASE. First thing I'm going to do is going to create a new form. I'm going to go into the designer. There we go. I'm now going to take employees and drop that onto my new form. Excuse me. Excuse me. And then I'm going to go to my component palette, and this time I'm going to go ahead and get another grid. Drop the grid on there. And I'm going to go ahead and set up my data linkage to be employees. Okay? So now we have that. We've got it all set up here. Everything looks good. And now what I want to do is I want to go to the 32-bit data buttons. So I'm going to come back into my component palette just like before, right mouse click, set up custom components, add, got to go up to that directory. So I'm going to come into the +11 DBL classes, 32.cc, right there they are, hit open, hit OK. The component palette has updated, and we come in here and you'll see that we have data access. And this time what I want, right mouse click, set up, delete, add, 32cc, open, add, cancel, OK. File, save as, a little bit, class 2, example 3. All right, and let me go into here. Okay, I don't see my, okay, let me exit out for a real quick second. Did that update? Let's see, yeah, it's right there. Okay, let me see, let me go back into here. Let me go back into forms. Let me go ahead into example 3, go back into design forms. That was from the earlier class. So let me go into here to class 2, example 3, and design form. Okay, component palette. There we go. Don't know, guys. I'm sorry. I don't know what that was. So I want to be able to add in a first button, and then I want to also be able to add in a last button. So now I have my 2 buttons set up ready to go. So I'll put this over here, put this guy over here. We'll go ahead and save it, and we'll run it. So now if I want to go to the end, I can go to the end. If I want to go to the beginning, I can go to the beginning. Great. So let's go ahead and go back into Designer real quick. Let's go back into our buttons. And this time I want to go back into my data buttons, and I want to go ahead and I want to click the append button. So I'll throw an append button on there. And I also want to throw in a save button. So we'll do a save button. And then I also want to do a delete button. So we'll go ahead and put the delete button in there. Now what's great about this is that I can make these a different size. So I can come in here and do that. And make these all about the same size here. And the great part about this is that I didn't really have to write anything. It automatically knew it knows how to handle everything that I've got. So I've got a little table here with the save button and then with the delete button. So I save it. I go ahead and hit the run. And I can go ahead and hit my first, which I'm already there. I can hit my last. I can say, let's append. I can come in here and say Mike Rozlog, Mike Rozlog. And then I can go ahead and hit the save button. It's now part of that. And so if I go back up to the last one, there's Mike Rozlog. If I go up to the first, there's Jennifer Clark. If I want to, I can go back to the bottom one. And if I want to hit the delete button, I can come in, hit the save button instead. All this has already been coded for me. I haven't had to write one line of code. Are you sure you want to delete the current row? I'm sure. And we're done. So again, the data buttons make it really, really easy for you to add data-aware controls to your applications and ship those out, and with the resource files and all that kind of good stuff. So that kind of ends it for me.